Hello and welcome to Pour It Out, the marketing podcast for health brands who refuse to be bland. I'm your host, Rachel Hawkins, and today I am joined by my incredible co-host, Kat Wyeth. Hey, Kat.
Hey, Rachel.
On today's show, we discuss the drama surrounding Crumbl Cookies' Australian pop-up store and the marketing lesson that we can all learn from them. I also want to have a conversation about why therapists are so dang reluctant to show up on social media. And then we answer a question from the community. How can I manage boundaries with clients who reach out to me or attempt to communicate with me through social media? But first, welcome to the podcast, Kat.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Rachel. I'm so honoured to be here. I can't wait. This chat's going to be a really good one. We always have a lot of great chats and we get to record it this time. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I know I've just thrown you in the deep end. I'm just asking you to trust my vision because you haven't yet even heard an episode of this podcast at the time of recording. But just to fill listeners in on, who you are one half of the duo behind The Thriving Therapist, which is an online community and education platform for established and emerging therapists. You're also the co-founder of the Psych Collaborative, which is a virtual psychology practice. And you also dabble in the world of podcasting as well. You've got two podcasts, the Psychology Sisters and the Thriving Therapist podcast that you host alongside your friend and business partner, Amy Hudson. So it's safe to say you're pretty busy.
When you lay it all like that, it sounds busier than what it actually is. But it's nice to have a bit of a podcast aficionado with me today.
Look, I feel like I've asked the right person to co-host this episode with me for sure. Now, before we hit record, I did let you know that podcast producer Sam, who you very kindly connected me with.
Hi, Sam.
He has set me the task of sticking to timings in this episode because apparently I like to waffle. I don't know.
Don't we all?
Never heard that before. So should we just jump straight into the first segment?
Let's do it. Let's go. We got this.
Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen.
Shut up!
Oh my God.
Yeah, bitch, I said what I said.
This is Flavor of the Week, the segment where we discuss a trending brand or marketing topic and pull out some practical lessons for you to apply within your own business. And I'm not going to lie, I'm completely breaking the rules of my own segment today because I am bringing a very old news story to the table here, but I just think it's such a good one. I can't not talk about it on the podcast. I am, of course, referring to the Crumbl Cookies Australian pop-up saga of late September 2024. Did you hear about this, Kat, when it all happened? You did.
Yeah.
You're across it.
Oh, if it's cookie related, Rachel, I am across it. There's one thing I keep my finger on the pulse with, it's baked goods. So absolutely, I am so across. The Crumbl cookie controversy was incredible. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, actually.
Absolutely. I have much to say. So let's bring everyone up to speed on what happened. So for those who have never heard about Crumbl Cookies, they are a franchised chain of bakeries in America and Canada, and they specialize in making these super buttery, super decadent cookies. And they are so popular on social media. So they've got over 6 million followers on Instagram and 9.6 million followers on TikTok at the time of recording. So when Sydney Siders heard that Crumbl Cookies was launching this pop-up in Bondi, Australia, the response was so overwhelming. Everyone was so excited about it. So fast forward to the day of the pop-up, and apparently the streets of North Bondi were just filled with people that reportedly waited in line for over an hour to get their hands on one of these cookies, which were being sold for $17 each. Which is crazy. So their normal price is $5 in the US, so $5. However, when they got their hands on these cookies, they were supposedly pretty awful. And of course, everyone flocked straight to social media to share their experience at this Sydney pop-up store and basically blast the company for selling these overpriced, really awful tasting cookies. But what people didn't know is that the pop-up was essentially a complete scam because the pop-up was supposedly run by what the media reported to be an unaffiliated group of fans who had purchased like 800 cookies or something from a legitimate Crumbl cookie store in Hawaii. And then they flew to Australia with all of these cookies and resold them days later at this like super inflated price point. Can you imagine?
You know what I think
it.
about is the Border Patrol. Like, imagine searching someone's bag.
What box did they tick when they were filling out that form that you have to fill out on the plane? So, of course, the media went absolutely nuts when they found out about this. And then Crumbl Cookies came out with this statement saying that the Australian pop-up was not sponsored by them. They're like, we have no idea what this is. We have nothing to do with it. However, we do love how excited you are about our cookies. And the fraudsters who ran this event, they seemingly like disappeared overnight. I think they came out with a statement and they were like, oh, we're sorry, but we actually never said that we were from like Crumbl Cookies, so that's on you if you thought that we were. And there was like no consequences for this kind of like scam event, right? And this immediately raised a bit of a red flag for me. And I thought, what is the bet that this is a massive PR stunt that Crumbl Cookies have constructed in order to validate whether or not there is demand for their product here in Australia? And sure enough, a few days after all of this went down, Crumbl Cookies then comes out again announcing, oh, guess what? We're actually planning to open stores in Australia.
Oh my gosh.
And of course, my marketing brain is like going wild. And I just think this provides a basis for such a good conversation around the importance of validating a market before you launch a new business or before you create and launch a new product, because this is a step that I see so many business owners miss, particularly those who create digital products, I have to say, or programs. And what happens is they spend all of this time developing this product without really knowing for sure, is this something that their ideal clients want and are going to spend money on? And then what happens is they launch these products and they struggle to sell them. And sometimes this is because what they are selling is not actually what their ideal client wants. What are your thoughts on the whole process of validating the market? Because I know the Thriving Therapist is a relatively young brand. How did you guys go about starting the business and validating the market?
Great question. Firstly, just want to highlight Crumbl Cookies, iconic. It really plays into the phrase of any publicity is good publicity, because I remember hearing that and thinking, God, that's a terrible thing that happened. But God, I could really go some cookies right now.
That's right.
Maybe it's playing into this, even though it wasn't a great look for the brand. I can imagine it stirred some controversy, and now, it's front of mind for people.
Absolutely.
And it's cookies. And I actually think it's really clever. They sold these cookies that were terrible. So then, when the Crumbl Cookies store actually comes, it's probably going to be better. So you've started with a low brow
Set the
cookie.
bar low.
Set the bar so low they can only impress. For anyone that comes in, they've given them a second chance and they're only probably going to be impressed by better cookies. So actually, iconic.
Bravo to their PR team.
Chef's kiss. Good for you. Validating your market is so important. And when Amy and I were first starting to think about, firstly, we always go back to when we're thinking about launching a new business or a new product, what is it that we need? We're quite intuitive in, when launching the Thriving Therapist, we were thinking, what is it that we needed when we were starting out? When we were emerging therapists, we kept coming back to this, this idea of what is it that we really needed? We felt this huge disconnect and gap in a community, first and foremost, particularly as therapists. I'm a psychologist and Amy is a psychotherapist. There is this unspoken hierarchy that exists within our fields, and I can imagine perhaps other health fields as well, that once you become registered, once you step into your first full-time role, it feels like you're on your own, and it is quite an isolated role for a lot of us. And Amy and I kept coming back to, we really needed some community. And while there is supervision and maybe there's groups within your workplace, it just wasn't the same as having other therapists around you where you could take off your mask and be really honest and vulnerable and share your struggles, share your wins, but also share the vulnerabilities as well. So we kept coming back to this idea of, I wish we had that. And I wonder if we could be that for others. And a lot of people who followed our podcast were actually therapists themselves. And we thought, this would be a great idea to see if other people feel like this as well. So we actually held a night. It was almost like a community night. We invited young therapists, emerging and established therapists, to come and just share their experiences with us, just to see if they felt the same as us. And we had questions like, what did you find the most difficult when you first started as a therapist? Or what frustrates you about being a therapist? What do you feel is lacking as an emerging or established therapist? And we kept hearing, we need community, we need skill building, and we need and confidence building. Things that really we don't actually get a lot of in the therapist field. And so when we heard that time and time again from that night, we then sent out surveys, to really confirm exactly what was missing. And two things kept coming up. I want help building my dream business, and I want help with my confidence. I feel a lot of imposter syndrome, and I need some support around that. And so we heard that a few times over and over again. And that's then how we validated our market. Okay. And I know that we brought you in to really help us out to really clarify what we needed to do to get there. But we first went with what we needed, and then we confirmed that and validated that with our market. And that's what led us down the path to the thriving therapist.
And I love that you point that out, that you didn't just think of the idea yourself and run with it. You then took that additional step to validate, because I think it's so easy for our personal biases to influence what we do. And sometimes there is a disconnect. Sometimes we aren't our ideal client, or sometimes we are, and maybe we're a smaller group of the majority, in terms of how they're, thinking, feeling, what they want. So I think that is the best advice that we could probably give to anyone who is listening and, has this idea for a business or has this idea for a new offer and wants to take steps to really validate that. Speak to people who are representative of your ideal client. And as you say, ask them, what are they struggling with? What do they feel is missing? How can you best support them? What do they need? And don't just speak to one person, speak to many people as well. And as you said, Kat, those repeating themes or conversation points come up after a while. And you can really use that to guide the development of whatever you're working on.
Absolutely. It was so pivotal for us to have that confirmed, and then allowed us to fine tune our offering. Okay, if they're really needing skill building or confidence building, what can we do? How can we support that? Or how can we help them with that business, building their skills around business? So market research, and also people love to help you. That's what we found. We're quite worried about asking people who don't want to take up their time. What if they don't want to talk to us? But actually, if there is a problem that people keep coming back to, they want the support, they want the solution, and they want to tell you. We found that people were actually quite passionate about sharing with us and wanted to tell us what the solution that they needed, essentially. So don't be afraid to ask people, because they actually want to help you and they want the solution themselves. You're actually helping them by asking them for help.
That is so true. Such good advice. So the take home here is, you don't need to pull a massive PR stunt like Crumbl cookies. Just talk to some people.
And then go buy your own fresh cookies.
Yes.
I got you. How do you know what's good for me? That's my opinion!
This is a Hot Take, the segment where we discuss and give our opinion on pertinent brand marketing and industry topics. And today we want to talk about something that we've been observing online, that being therapists' reluctance to use social media as a marketing channel. And I'm sure this is a conversation that could also apply to other industries or other professions, but I certainly feel personally that therapists in particular are a group that I have observed as being a little bit weary or cautious of utilizing social media platforms like Instagram, like TikTok. Now, I have my own ideas as to why this may be the case, but of course, Kat, you work with therapists, right? You are a therapist, you know the industry so well. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on why therapists may be scared or fearful or reluctant to utilize social media as a marketing channel?
I really come up against this a lot too. And I think there's been a lot of starting to see some change within the marketing space for therapists, but absolutely a lot slower than a lot of other industries. I know you brought that up, Rachel. You really notice that. You work a lot within health, and you really notice that therapists certainly are quite conservative. And honestly, in my experience, I completely understand why. We are trained. It is almost drilled into us that professional integrity, that being really clear and concise and safe with your marketing is how you protect yourself and how you protect your clients. And so to deviate from the traditional being, traditional marketing platforms, perhaps for therapists, or putting a flyer up in your local GP clinic, it was word of mouth. Really, essentially, away from that, would to deviate away from the norm. And so when we start to bring in social media or internet, then that creates this anxiety of this is a brave new world. And actually, there's not really been any updated guidelines to guide us on how to use social media. We've had some, but it still leaves a lot of room for ambiguity and a lot of grey area. And so if there's ambiguity or grey area, what we're trained to do is to stay safe, to err on the side of caution. And it's better to not market yourself or to use these platforms because that keeps you safe, it keeps your role safe, it keeps your professional integrity, it keeps your clients safe. Well, that's what we think. And so therefore it's like, well, I don't want to put myself out there. I don't want to share something or do the wrong thing because there is so much grey area and I'd rather just not do it at all. And that's what I hear. I do a lot of mentoring and supervision with young therapists or, emerging therapists. And that's the constant worry that I notice. And I had that myself. I get it. And so there's so much fear about doing the wrong thing and jeopardizing a role that you've worked so hard to get to. Put so much time into. So a lot of it I feel is fear.
That's right. That's so true. And I know that we've had many a conversation about this. And as you know, and as listeners would know now, having heard my story, my background is in dietetics before I, moved into marketing. And something that I said to you when, we started working together was that I felt like the dietetic industry was a couple of years ahead of a lot of other professions in terms of their use of social media as a marketing channel. And we spoke about this. And I think this year in 2024, I've noticed a lot more therapists starting to show up online, which is wonderful. But the conversations that I'm having with them are the conversations I was having with dietitians 3-4 years ago. Even just the idea of showing up on social media and showing your face is something that I've found people, as you say, are quite fearful of doing. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, that professional integrity piece is so big. Because I thought initially I was like, maybe they're just not sure how to use social media. And maybe that plays into it. But absolutely, I think the worry of doing or saying something that could risk or jeopardize their professional integrity or get them in trouble with their governing body is a really big player and driver of that fear.
And social media has also been seen perhaps with a more conservative profession as quite trivial, as young, as silly, not credible, and also a lot of room for things to go wrong. Like kind of keeping client confidentiality or boundaries. And I know we'll chat about that a bit later. So it's almost like, all these things that, it's trivial or it's not credible platform or things could go wrong. So I better just
stay away from it. Yeah, you're right. And you are right as well when you were mentioning that the bodies themselves, I feel like they almost didn't know how to handle it in order to create a guideline. And that sort of then trickles down into the industry. But perhaps it would be useful to talk about how therapists can actually show up and can market themselves on social media platforms whilst maintaining those professional standards. I think my first biggest tip here would be getting really clear on those professional standards, on the relevant ethics codes that are set out by governing bodies like APRA, like the APS, and then establish your own boundaries for how you want to show up online, because that's also going to differ between people too, right?
Yeah. What's your comfortability? Some therapists and health professionals may be really comfortable sharing about their day or having some self-disclosure or sharing parts of their personal life. And that is okay as long as, it's spoken about with clients and you feel comfortable with that. But then some therapists feel really uncomfortable about that, and that is okay. I love that tip. It's not just having to go out there and be vulnerable and share everything or go out and share nothing. It's what feels right for me, what feels good for me as a therapist. And I think one rule of thumb that I find really helpful is how you show up with clients and in the public world when you're talking to stakeholders is how you should show up online. If you are someone who has a little bit, who shares your personality when you're talking to clients or with stakeholders, then that's okay to bring online. But if you're someone that wants to keep it really professional, then that's okay to share online. There is no right or wrong. I think go back to your comfort level here.
I agree. And you know what? I think that sometimes people can get a little bit confused in thinking that I need to share things about my personal life in order to be relatable online or in order for people to feel connected to me as a practitioner and for me to market myself. But that's not the case at all. So if you're someone who makes the decision that, you know what, I don't really want to share anything about my personal life beside maybe the fact I like going for a morning coffee and I have a dog and, I do Pilates as an example, there's so much that you can share about your work that provides that basis for that human to human connection, which is what sharing parts of your personality and your personal life does. So you don't necessarily have to share day in the life content, but you could share some behind the scenes, show your therapy room, talk about what you do to prepare for sessions. Maybe if you're developing a resource, talk about the resource that you're developing, because all of those things provide insight into your work and also your approach as a practitioner and your values. And, all those little insights will enable your audience to get to know you and like you and over time trust you. And that trust, I'm like a broken record when I say this, but the trust is what is needed for someone to be interested in working with you. And that is marketing.
Absolutely. And that's also, that trust is so important for your connection, right? Connection,
Yes.
that's a similar vein to your clinical relationship or your therapeutic alliance with someone, is trust is so important. And I think with social media, clients are now building trust with you before they even see you. And I get that that's marketing, but that's a brave new world for the therapeutic relationship. Whereas previously, 20 years ago, I don't know you, you don't know me, we're going to get to know each other. But I know that it's just as anecdotally, Amy and I always talk about that clients who listen to our podcast or follow us on social media, they'll say, oh, I feel like I know you already. Yeah. How's your dog Sammy going?
Yes, that's right. But you know what I found when I was practicing, that was actually amazing, because I never had any issues with client retention or like people knew who I was. They knew that they liked me, my style, my approach before they even made that inquiry. So I suppose the quality of clients that I was seeing, the quality of inquiries I found were a lot higher than my colleagues who perhaps weren't online and their inquiries weren't familiar with their brand. But to your point, you're spot on. That's exactly what people are doing when they receive a referral from their doctor now. They're going online and they're Googling, or they're getting on social media and they're going to find a therapist that they want to work with. They're not necessarily accepting that referral anymore. So it just is so advantageous to, show up online. I suppose, any final thoughts from you, Kat, to wrap up this conversation?
So many great points here. I love that idea of going first to your code of ethics and then going then to your comfortability. I think something that I find so helpful is when I'm talking to a lot of my supervisees or therapists that I mentor, it's a lot of questions I get is, what should I share? Now that I feel a bit more comfortable, what should I share? And I think share what you keep coming up against with your clients. When we're talking about niching and finding your niche, what is it that you notice you keep having the same conversations around, or what are you really passionate about? I think that can almost open the gate to, oh, okay, that sounds like a really great path forward, because there's so much fear, not just about starting, but then continuing about
so
what
true.
to share. And that can actually be so powerful to appealing and talking to your ideal clients or to your niche clients, or the areas that you just love and are passionate to work with. So stick with your passion, stick with your niche, and just keep coming back to what am I noticing is coming up with my clients, or what do I love to talk about, what lights me up. And that's a really great starting point, I think.
Absolutely. And educate around those things, right? Like by providing that education, you're not only helping your audience, but you're also helping to build your authority as an expert at what you do. So so many great tips.
You're doing amazing, sweetie. It's amazing.
You're a hustler.
Name 'em, name 'em, name 'em.
This is Toastworthy Brands, the segment where we shout out the brands that we think are doing pretty cool things online. Keeping on theme, I might go first with my shout out here, but I'm going to shout out a therapist, and actually an American therapist, Lauren Larkin, who is the Instagram and TikTok handle Lel Therapy. So Lel Therapy. I'll link in the show notes. I just think she is hilarious. I know we've spoke a bit about the benefits of humanizing your content in Hot Take, and I think Lauren uses social media so well to share the moments that happen between therapy sessions, and she creates these hilarious videos. And funnily enough, and I know I've mentioned this to you a couple of weeks ago, something I've learnt about therapists is that you guys use a lot of humor to communicate, which I love. And she does that so well. So if anyone is in need of some inspiration for how you can, I suppose, share more human sides of your brand and relate and connect with your audience, she's a really good account towards for some inspiration.
Oh, she's great. I love her between therapy takes, and you're right, she is so funny. And I actually find this, and I wonder if you've noticed this in some of that market research, is American therapists or therapists in America and perhaps other countries feel so much further ahead with their marketing and maybe being more established. Have you noticed that as well?
I have, yeah. Is there a reason for that?
Look, I mean, I think America is ahead of the curve in so many different ways, but I think in America it's a state-by-state jurisdiction around their governing bodies. And so different states will have different rules and codes of ethics. And I wonder if it's because they have a little bit more flexibility with their code of ethics that, maybe it's quite more progressive perhaps than the Australian board and bodies.
Yeah, that's interesting, because now that you point that out, absolutely, they do seem a lot further ahead there. And I suppose it's great for Australian listeners who can look towards them for inspiration. Who have you got to share with us?
I would love to shout out someone in actually our community. I was sitting on this for a little while actually when I was preparing for this episode, and I was thinking, there's so many amazing therapists that I want to shout out. But it would be a miss for me to not shout out someone who is someone that we started to follow in our private practice firstly. And then I know that we have started to follow her in the Thriving Therapist as well. So she's a psychologist. She is based in Queensland, and her handle is ADHD with Joanna B. And she is, do you know her?
I don't,
her social media presence is so authentic. She has absolutely crushed it on social media because she has shown up as herself. And I think when you look at certain social media brands, particularly as therapists, you're trying to maintain professional integrity and maintain your professional image and also be human and funny and all of the above. And she's just an account that as soon as I see her content, as soon as I see her face, I just feel this instant familiarity, this connection. She has been really open with being diagnosed with ADHD only recently, and she works a lot with women with ADHD. And just her content is so relatable. It's funny. She uses humor a lot. I'm really noticing a trend. As soon as you said that, I was like, this is a coping mechanism we probably all need to dive into as therapists.
Sure, it's not the worst, but
what are we avoiding here? She's just fantastic online. I really recommend her. I'm sure that Rachel will pop her handle in the show notes. She's, as a psychologist, it's just seeing her content is, I can imagine as a client or as a potential client, it's so comforting. She's, just incredible. So I really want to give her a shout out. Please go and check her out. She's got so much, she's so educational, she's so funny, and she's got her own podcast as well about all things ADHD. So shout out to Jo. You are the best.
All right. Yeah, I will link her in the show notes, and I will be doing a search after this recording.
Just answer this question.
Receipts, proof, timeline, screenshot.
Oh my God, I'm lit.
This is Straight Shot, the segment where we answer a question from the Pour It Out community. And today we have a good one. So this question reads, how do you manage boundaries with clients who reach out to you or attempt to communicate with you through social media? I know it's important to maintain client confidentiality and act professionally online, but I also don't want to offend or upset my client by not responding to them if they send me a message on Instagram or engage with my content. What is the best way to navigate this situation?
Oh, such a great question. One that I think many therapists keep coming back to. Might keep them awake at night for so many of us.
Do you have any insights into this, Kat? I'm sure you have many a tip.
Yes. I think in our last 4 years of our business and private practice, maintaining confidentiality and boundaries has been the forefront. And social media, because we're quite active on social media, has meant that clients will sometimes reach out or comment or DM us. And so we've had to get really good at clarifying our boundaries and setting expectations. My first tip is writing or having a social media policy in your onboarding process, and something that you verbally remind your clients as you're speaking to them. Something a social media policy might just lay out: if you send me a friend request to my personal social media accounts, this is what I will do. If you DM me outside of session asking for advice, this is the what I will do, or these are the expectations that we'll set together. So social media policy really lays out all the things that could happen and sets out a bit of a way that you will respond to that as a therapist.
There's so much. That is so thorough. And I'm someone who loves to know everything up front, right? So laying those expectations out really clearly, I think it really helps to set you up for a successful, client practitioner relationship. I know I have received a question before around what if someone comments on my content and in doing so sort of reveals that they're a client. So let's just say they're like, oh, something to talk about in our next session or something like that. My recommendation would be anything that could, reveal that a follower is a client, we would just delete that. Is that what you do in your practice?
Yes. So that will be part of that social media policy, is if you comment and reveal anything that ascertains that you are a client, that reveals your identity, we will need to delete that. Not because we are trying to be malicious or rude, but it is part of our code of ethics to maintain your confidentiality. So that's why setting it from the get-go is so important, because then you're right, that kind of avoids that, my therapist was really mean, or why did they delete my comment, that confusion that could rupture the relationship. So laying it out from the beginning, and actually something that can be helpful is, long-term clients might forget that, and they might be completely fine sharing. I go to therapy. It's a very normalized experience this day and age, and they might celebrate that. But it is still our responsibility to delete that comment. And actually I find it a really great time to come back to that in session of hey, I know we spoke about this a couple of years ago, but a couple of years has gone by, and I just want to remind you of that. And while I love that you're engaging with this content, or that you really resonated with that, unfortunately it's my duty of care to delete that. But I'd love to talk it through in today's session. Let's unpack what you commented on. And I find that really helpful to check in and let the client know that it's nothing to do with you, but just my job as a therapist.
It's a really good approach. I like that, just that open communication. I also think that it's helpful to have some pre-drafted responses. So that's probably another tip that listeners can take away from this episode. Responses where you can really easily respond to someone who may be asking for personal advice, let's say, or a client, again, is sort of overstepping the boundary and, wanting to engage with you outside of session. just having those responses prepared and ready to go can be really helpful and sort of take a little bit of that worry around like, oh, how am I going to approach this? If you just have that one blanket, response for how you handle various scenarios.
I love that. And to go further with that, as a business account on Instagram, you can set up automatic replies. So I know for us, we don't talk or have any liaison with anyone in our DMs. We've put that in our bio. We don't respond to DMs. They're not monitored, but you can have an automatic reply set up of, thank you for getting in touch with us. However, we don't monitor this inbox. If you have any inquiries, you'd like to book a session, or you'd like to contact your clinician, this is the avenues to go to, or this is the emergency 000 or lifeline. So even that automatic response, you're still kind of giving them the information, the pathways to follow, but you're not sitting there each time trying to field and say the right things and get into a conversation with them.
I love that. So many good tips. Well, that brings us to the end of the podcast. Kat, thank you so much for joining me. I had so much fun.
Oh, Rachel, thank you for having me. It is such an honor and a privilege. And throughout this whole conversation, firstly, you have so many words of wisdom. But secondly, I am craving a cookie. This whole time I've been thinking like, I really need to go and get a Crumbl cookie.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have to. Okay, it's not a cookie, but listeners won't know. But at the beginning of this recording, I got a delivery from the postman and Kaya went absolutely nuts and barked and went wild. It may or may not have been a delivery of no dough donuts, which are like the crumbled cookie donut version.
Oh my God. No wonder Kaya went mad. She's like, yes, sugar.
She didn't want to eat the postman. She wanted to eat the donuts. Yes.
Can relate, girlfriend.
Now, for those who would like to connect with you, where can they find you online?
So Amy and I have set up The Thriving Therapist, which is a wonderful community for emerging or established therapists. Come and join us. We have a Facebook group as well. So at The Thriving Therapist on Instagram. Private practice is at The Psych Collaborative, and our podcast is at The Psychology Sisters. If you want to have a laugh along with us, we do a lot of laughing.
It's great. You guys are great. And I will link all of the links in the show notes as well. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode and would like to support the podcast, I would love it if you could leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, maybe even tell a friend or two about the show, because it does help me to reach more people, particularly as a new podcast. Plus, at the moment, we're also running an awesome giveaway competition where you can win my entire digital product suite valued at over $4,500. So that means you will get Gramtini, Margarita, and Chat G&T as the winner of this comp. So if that sounds like something you want to get your hands on, you can enter by rating and reviewing Pour It Out on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, taking a screenshot of this and sending it to us via the form linked in the show notes. The competition closes at 11:59 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on Friday, January 31st, and the winner is going to be drawn at random and announced in our podcast Facebook community group. It's a little bit of a mouthful to get to the end of that, but I just want to cross my T's, dot my I's. All right, everyone, that is it from me. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you all next time.